Okay, great. So hello, everyone. My name is Caitlin Carnes. I'm the Administrative and Outreach Coordinator for the Arts Council Windsor and Region. I'm very honored to be working in this community and on this territory. The original caretakers of this land, the Indigenous peoples, lived and thrived prior to colonization. In that regard, I acknowledge the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations comprised of the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and Potawatomi. As a part of ongoing structures of allyship, I work to ensure that the space is given to Indigenous culture perspectives and that these perspectives are respected. So I would like to welcome everyone to the ACWR grant writing and info session. I got this idea about a month or so ago as I knew grant season was approaching, and myself as an artist, especially in these trying times with COVID, funding projects might not be as easy as they once were. So with me tonight, I have our new Executive Director, Alejandro Tamayo. Alejandro, if you want to give a little wave.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome. And we also have Maura Broadhurst from the Ontario Arts Council to walk you through some best practices and tips for grant writing. Maura is the Arts Sector Development Officer at OAC. In this capacity, she manages the Art Service Organization's programs, as well as programs in the audience development stream. For more than 55 years, the OAC has played a vital role in promoting and assisting the development of arts for the enjoyment and benefit of people across Ontario. So just one quick thing for this session moving forward, Maura is going to give her presentation. And as I said, feel free to ask questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And this session will be posted on ACWR's YouTube channel, so you can always go back and refer to the session when you're writing your own grants. So without further ado, Maura, you can take the floor.
Thanks so much, Caitlin, and thank you to the Arts Council at Windsor and Region. I'm really happy to be with you all tonight. Just to locate myself, I am coming from the basement of the home where I find myself in Toronto, the area known as Takaranto, and I just would like to honor the stewardship of the Huron-Wendat, the Iroquois Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the Credit that are from this region. We know that today the meeting place of Toronto, where I am, is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and I'm so grateful to be working gather with all of you in different parts of the province. I come from a settler family, and we had opportunities and possibilities because of the treaty with the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, which governs this area. And I just want to express my gratitude and my ongoing work to understand and share in that history with the Indigenous peoples of this area. I am going to share a screen with you today just so I can outline what we're going to be covering tonight. My main goal today is to make the grant writing process a little less opaque, perhaps a little less scary, or mysterious anyway, and to encourage you as much as possible, but also give you information that I hope will help you decide whether a grant is the right thing for you, which grant, how, when, and where you would find out about them and apply. So obviously I'm going to use the Ontario Arts Council's programs as my examples and the structure that we use and the processes that we use, but I'm hoping that many of these will be tips that you can use for any grant program that you want to apply to with any funder. Hopefully you'll find some of this helpful for all of that. So yeah, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the OAC and our programs, how to prepare for an application, how we actually do it. Now it is all, for a few years now, all our applications have been done online, and that's a pretty common scenario. We no longer are doing paper applications. What happens after the deadline? And I think this part is the really critical part. What happens? You submit your application and several months later you find out the result, but what happens in between those two things? And then again, how you find out about the results and what you do at that point. So that's sort of my plan of how to go through this with you tonight. If you do have questions, like Caitlin said, feel free to write them in the Q&A box. I can certainly take some if they're relevant to what I'm talking about, and we'll have time at the end as well for any So we'll get started. 1 second here. Okay. So just a little bit about the OAC then. We are the arts funding agency of the province of Ontario. We are an agency that is run as an arm's length agency through the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism and Culture Industries. That means that we are funded entirely through the government. So our budget comes through that ministry entirely. And we then give out the arts funding for the province, the official arts funding for the province. We have a couple of different ways that we do that. Primarily, there are two kinds of grants that we give out. We give out operating grants and we give out project grants. I'm not going to talk too much about operating grants tonight. Those are grants that are given out to not-for-profit arts organizations that have an ongoing relationship with the OAC. They belong to a specific program. So, for example, the Arts Council Windsor Region is part of a program of art service organizations that I manage. They receive annual funding from us. They are assessed by a panel of peers. But there is a sort of an ongoing commitment to those organizations. Once an organization is receiving operating funding, they receive it every year, unless an assessment is a week for many years in a row, and that's sort of the community saying, actually, this organization no longer should be in this program. But that's sort of a different kind of thing. I'm going to focus on our project funding. We have project funding in all our disciplines and different kinds of activities, and some of them go to individual artists, some of them go to groups and collectives, and some of them go to not-for-profit organizations, and some programs fund all of those kinds of different kinds of applicants. We have grouped our granting programs in these 4 streams. So the first is creating and presenting. That is the biggest stream we have. Most people come to the Ontario Arts Council or other arts funders because they want to create some art or they want to present it to the public. And so whether you're a musician or a writer or a dancer, you know, there's a program that will allow you to create new work or to present your work. Building audiences and markets is to expand your audience, to expand the market that you have, your audience for your work. That tends to be programs like, for example, traditionally we have a touring. I'm now hesitating because traditionally we have a touring program, and I think that makes sense to people. If you want to go on tour as a musician, or again as any kind of, or you have an exhibition touring, you would traditionally receive funding through that program. It is actually currently on pause. It's been suspended just because of COVID and because of the travel restrictions and things like that. But normally, touring would be part of our building audiences and markets. Engaging communities and schools. Again, many of you probably wear many hats and do many things as an artist. You might, yes, create your own work, but you also might work in the schools, or you might run a summer program through the library or some other activity with the public in your community, and there's programs in that stream. And then developing careers and art services. This is where there are some programs for professional development, or again, a program like the one that funds the council here. Other services like that are funded through that stream. Most individuals or groups, most applicants, I guess I would say, come to the OAC through their discipline. So you are a writer, you look at what literature programs we have, and you most often that is how people start. They come in through those disciplines. But we do also have these other kinds of activity type grants where you are, they're multidisciplinary programs, but there's an activity like the touring, for example. It's a multidisciplinary program that people might come in through that way as well. We fund professional arts activity. So this is always a bit of a question, because what does it mean to be a professional artist? It does not have to mean that you have gone to school and have a certificate to say that you have a diploma in some form of art. You can, that could be the way that you have become a professional artist, but it doesn't have to be that way. You could be self-taught, you could have learned from an elder, or through other means other than through an official institution. But it does also mean that you have presented your work publicly. You've either published your work, had your work published, or you've had an exhibition in some kind kind of a public space, and that you seek financial compensation for your work. So, we all know it is a struggle to make a living as being an artist, but if you're a musician, you have you present when you perform, you sell tickets. People should be paying for you to come to see you, and how much, that's in some ways irrelevant, but they should be paying. You should be getting money for your work. If you are a craft artist, you're selling your work, perhaps, this kind of thing, that you at least are seeking financial compensation for your work as a professional artist. And of course, all of this is available on our website. And I've got a bit of a screenshot here of how the website is sort of structured. You'll see, I'm going to walk you through our website in a sec, though, but you'll see, just if you go along the top here, the main tab that applicants are going to go to is the grants tab. And this is where you're going to find all these different sort of sections and ways that you can enter into our programs to find a program that's right for you. But there are other things there. We do administer some awards. So you can find out about them there. And then, of course, there's some research that we've done and reporting that we've done that you'll find on our website. Caitlin, are you looking to say something?
Yes, I have a question. I believe referring to the professional artists. Someone asked, what
Okay.
if you do
Yeah.
some paid and some unpaid performance?
Yeah, as long as there has been, you've been paid for your work. I guess, and the other thing I didn't say that I should have is that it's also how you're perceived in the community. Would other artists in the community think that you too are an artist? Like, are you participating in the professional arts activity in your sector in some way? So yeah, so if you've done some things that are non-paid, sure, I think probably every artist has, so that's fine. But there is that notion too, a little bit, are you respected as an artist, or, as compared to somebody who is perhaps a hobbyist, which is obviously fine too, but that's just a different thing.
Great. And I also think
Okay.
that speaks for the next question. As someone who's an emerging artist professionally, I think that answers both those questions.
Yeah, some of
Yeah.
our programs have some pretty more clear, not clear, I don't want to say that, but a further definition that they use. So our visual arts creation program, for example, has a definition of what it means to be an emerging artist versus a mid-career artist and an established artist. So, one of the things that I hope that you will glean through this presentation tonight is to always check in. So if you're not sure about your eligibility in a program, read the information on the website if you're able to, and things like that. Do the research if you're able to. But then, if you're still not 100% sure if you fit, is to call us and check in about that, anything like that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so I think at this point, I'm just going to stop sharing this and I'll go right to our live website, so I can walk you through that a little bit. Okay, Caitlin, if you're ever not seeing what I'm hoping you're seeing, you could let me know. But this is our website. So again, you'll have all those tabs across. We have special information about COVID right now, et cetera. And you could just type something in the keywords if you're, you don't even know where to start, but there's something you want to do and you want to see what pops up. You could certainly search that way. But like I say, most people are going to go through our disciplines. So you'll go to the grants tab and then you'll go through the disciplines and see what's available to you. There are also, and I will be speaking in a minute about our priority groups. So if you are a member of a priority group, you could also go in that way. You'll end up with the same event information, and you'll just get there from a different way. So let's say you're a writer and you want to go to our literature programs. All of the disciplines sort of follow the same formula in terms of what you're going to see. So even if you're not a writer, if you're a dancer or a visual artist, the same kind of formula applies. So you'll get a list here of all the programs for that discipline in English and French. So you'll see literary creation works for performance, or literary creation work for publication. If you're an organization, there's some project program. Again, there's our operating program, but that is dealt with a little bit differently. But let's say you run a little festival. I shouldn't say little. You run a literary festival in your community. Going to literary organizations projects might be the right spot for you. And then there's also recommender grants for writers, which I will talk about in a minute too. But I'm going to go to, just for an example, literary creation projects works for publication. You'll get a little blurb and then the learn more, which will take you to the webpage for that program. So again, every program has a webpage like this, and there's a few important components. First is the contact. We have many programs at the OAC. So although I can speak to you generally about most of them, I'm not going to be able to give you the nitty gritty of every program because there are nuances to every program. There's slight differences between all of our programs. But in this case, for example, if you decided this was a program that you were interested in, you would give Rohana a call or send her a quick email just if you had questions or if you wanted to confirm anything. But fundamentally, the webpage is going to give you the purpose of the program, the deadline dates. Many of our project programs have 2 deadline dates a year, but you'll see this one has 1. So you'll pay attention to that. And we'll talk about that in a minute as well. How much you're allowed to ask for. So in this case, you're allowed to ask for up to $12,000. And then who can apply? So, in this program, it tells you about the publishing history that you have to be eligible to apply to this program. But in some cases, it'll be more about like, can individuals apply, or is it just an organization, or can ad hoc groups and collectives apply? Things like that. You'll find all that out here. And then a few things about ineligible applicants. And then what kinds of activities can you apply for? Okay, so again, it's important to go through all of this. Again, if you have any kind of challenges in accessing the website, then we're very happy to help you out and do that verbally over the phone or whatnot. But if you do have access, it is best to sort of review this a little bit so that when you do call us, your conversation is going to be more helpful. We're not going to be just giving you the basics. We'll be able to get really into what project you're thinking about applying for. So again, what it funds, what it doesn't fund, the timing that it would be that you would need to follow, and then if you do receive a grant, what you're required to report on. And then all the program web pages will have this section to apply. And there's some some guides that we can that can help inform you about our processes and requirements. This is a link to the application questions that you can go to. It also tells you what you're going to need to include in terms of your artistic support material and any other support documents. And then at the bottom, many will have very specific definitions for this kind of program. We use the same forms, the application forms for almost all of our, well, we have a few different forms, but many use the same form. So sometimes we use words that are very general, and so that it can apply to a visual artist and a writer and a dancer, etc. So here you're going to find possibly more specific things about the program you're looking at. Okay, so this, like I say, we could do that for any program. So, maybe you're going to look at that one, and then maybe you're going to also, look at any of the other literature programs, see which one you think is best for what you think you want to do and also fits your timing, perhaps. And then you're probably, again, unless you're quite familiar with the program, I would recommend calling whoever is identified here just to review your situation and make sure that how you're understanding the program is accurate, and any sort of specific things they might recommend or any tips they might give you. It certainly can't hurt. If you're calling the day before the deadline, you might have some troubles, but if you call a few weeks or months ahead of time, they can certainly have a more wholesome conversation with you. Okay, I'm going to just go back to my presentation here. Okay. So you'll have seen the tab for our priority groups. So OAC has identified, currently we have 6 groups of artists or organizations that fall into what we call priority groups. They are artists of color, deaf artists and artists with disabilities, Francophone artists, Indigenous artists, new generation artists, and we define that as being 18 to 30-year-olds, and artists living outside of Toronto throughout the province. These groups of artists or these communities have been identified because for different reasons, artisans throughout history and continuing to today, they have encountered barriers to accessing public funds for their art making and the exhibition of their work. So that's why they've been highlighted. And what it means is that we have some programs that are specifically for members of these communities. So we have a suite of Francophone programs, for instance, when you must be Francophone to apply to them, or you must be an Indigenous artist to apply to our suite of Indigenous arts programs. But for all of our programs, it's something that's taken into consideration in during assessment. So there's not a oh, you get an extra point if you're from one of these communities or anything like that. It's just something that we speak to assessors about. We ask them to keep it in mind. We ask them to remember why they are priorities, that there has been this inequity and throughout arts funding in our province, and that this is an effort to sort of try to address that. And they discuss it when they are having their conversations. So it's something to keep in mind. As artists in the Windsor area, you obviously are falling into at very least one priority of being outside of Toronto. It's something it is important that the applicant, I mean, in terms of the regions, we kind of know you're from outside of Toronto because we have your address. Nevertheless, if you belong to one of these other priority groups, or even, just being from Windsor, you might want to speak about that in your application, identify yourself as such. And certainly if you are from one of the other priority groups, it's important that you self-identify. We don't want, we tell assessors that they shouldn't be guessing or assuming. They need to know that an applicant is from one of those priorities. So it is important that you tell them, and how it has impacted your career potentially, and things that you feel comfortable sharing with assessors. I'm not saying that you should divulge everything about your personal history, by no means, but just they are working from what information you provide them, and that's all they can work from. You also maybe noticed in that literature page what's called in that case, it was the recommender grants for writers. We have a few other what we call third-party recommender programs. And these are programs through which we work with organizations in the province to provide funding to artists. So exhibition assistance, for example, we partner with a number of public galleries throughout the throughout the province, and they receive funds, and they are the ones that decide which artists will receive some funding for exhibitions, in this case, visual arts exhibitions that they have confirmed, and they need some extra funding, for example, to frame the work. So it's not to create the work. The work has already been created. The exhibition is already scheduled, but the artist needs just a bit of support to, for example, frame their work to be exhibition ready. You would apply through our system, but still to a local art gallery that you'd have to find which ones are participating in this program, and they would say, ask for some confirmation of that exhibition, etc., maybe a resume or something like that, and then you would receive that funding. And these tend to be smaller grants, so between, let's say, $500, $1,500, maybe up to $2,000, just to do very specific things that you need. The recommender grants, this is one where we work with publishers throughout the province, and you can apply to a number of the different publishers to read a sample of your work. And if you are chosen, then you get a little bit of funding to keep working on that whatever it is you're working, novel or whatever it is that you're writing. But the benefit here is also that your work is being seen by, in the case of publishers, by a publisher. Or an early, part of your work is being seen by any number of publishers, depending on how you apply. Or similarly with the visual arts example, the exhibition assistants, galleries are seeing your work. So it's also a good way to build a network and build some relationships. These are really great programs to come into the Ontario Arts Council as a first grant, if relevant and applicable, of course, to you. But they're smaller grants. It's a smaller application process. It's a little faster, maybe, to find out whether you received that grant, things like that. So I just wanted to point them out. And again, they're all on our website. If you want to find out a little bit more about them. They all work slightly differently. So you would need to do a little bit of looking into that and maybe having a conversation as well. Okay. So the other main thing I just want to share with you is even when you're not sure, you've looked at the website, you've talked to some other people, but you really can't figure it out. You don't know what's the right fit. Please do call us. If you call our general number, you'll see my colleague Olga will answer the phone and send you to the right person, the person that you should speak to. We are just people who worked out in the arts field for the most part as well, and we really are doing the work that we do because we want to help you. We want to support you, and it's way more fun to talk to you about your art project than it is to, move the paper around our desks that we need to do the administrative work. So, please don't ever hesitate. And like I say, if it's a busy time, and maybe that it takes a day or two to get back to you, but we are always interested in supporting you and helping you find the right place for you. Okay, so to prepare an application, so you've gone to the website, you've maybe had a conversation, you think you know what program is the right fit for you. You're going to read through all that. So a couple of things about the eligible. You've determined that you're eligible as an applicant. The timing is important. So you saw in that one example we looked at there, I think it was a September deadline for that program. Like I say, many of our programs will have 2 deadlines. So you're going to look and see, but this is why it's good to be aware of what programs exist out there, because if you come to me today and say, oh, I have this great idea for something I want to do in June, it's probably too late, because first of all, there may not be a deadline until June, or maybe there's not one till September, or maybe there was one last week. And so, to be aware when the deadlines are. Also, our assessment process does take about 4.5 months. So if you had a deadline today, April, May, June, July, you're going to find out probably in early August whether you've received this funding or not. So you need to factor that in when you come up with your plan for your activity. And if it's something that's not movable, like it's a summer camp that you're doing in July and you can't do summer camp in October, then you need to be conscious of when you need to apply in order to receive your funding in time to do your camp in July. If it's a project that, well, I was hoping to do it now, but I could do it a bit later, then maybe you have a bit more wiggle room there. Like I said, all of our applications go through our online system, and we fondly refer to our online system as NOVA. So anytime you see NOVA, that's what we're talking about. You're going to have to create a profile in our NOVA system, which is just a fancy way of saying, give us your address, name, address, phone number, a way to get in touch with you, that kind of thing. That's about it. That's about all you have to put in it. But you do have to have a profile in order to see the applications that are available to you. And our applications become available 2 months before the deadline. So again, if the deadline was today, you would have seen the applications available to you in the system as of January 25th, which means you can work on your application for any amount of time within that 2-month period. You can be filling it in, saving it, coming back to it, and you can submit the application anytime within that 2-month period. You do not have to wait until the very last day. And in fact, I would highly recommend you do not. But you can submit it a week before the deadline, a day before the deadline, a month before the deadline. But that time period that we need, that 4.5 months, starts as of that deadline date. Okay, so just to keep that in mind. We do have an inclusive application policy. So if you are someone who is deaf or has a disability and you require accommodation to help you with that application, do let us know, because we do have systems in place to provide you with support to do that. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of that if that applies to you. Most components. obviously there's going to be some questions, and the questions fundamentally are, you know, who are you? What do you want to do? And there, depending on the program, there may be more in-depth program questions like who is this project going to impact? It's going to impact you as an artist, of course, but maybe you're working with other artists and you're going to talk about how it will be beneficial to them as well. And maybe you're thinking about your audience and how this will be have a positive impact on your audience. You are absolutely going to have to include artistic examples. So again, depending on the program, that's probably going to be your own work, examples of that work. And it's important to look at how much you're allowed to include, how many examples, how long they can be, and what format they should be. It is a computer now, right, that you're submitting through. So there's going to be some hard stops. If you try to submit a Word document when it asked for a PDF, it won't let you. So you do have to pay attention. And if it asks you for a maximum of 10 pages and you try to submit something that's 12 pages, it's not going to let you. So, you know, do pay attention to those things and be prepared. If, you know, videos, there's very specific kinds of videos that we are able to accept and ones that you can't. So, you know, if you find that out on the last day and you don't have the right kind of video, then you know, you may be out of luck. So do pay attention to that. And then many, not all, but I would say many programs will ask you for some kind of a budget. Some of our programs are a flat amount. So for example, our visual arts creation projects, there's a $5,000 grant. You either get $5,000 or you get zero. But we have many programs where it's up to, let's say, $15,000. You can receive up to $15,000. You will have to show a budget of how you're going to use the amount that you are requesting. So even though you could receive $15,000, if you only show that you have only $7,000 of expenses that you need covered, then that's how much you should be asking for. You shouldn't be asking for 15,000 when you only need 7. That being said, if you need 15,000 and you're allowed to ask for up to 15,000, then you should ask for up to $15,000. But you'll have to show how you're going to use that $15,000. Some programs require other sources of revenue. So you need to show that you're selling tickets, or you're going to do a fundraiser, or you have a corporate sponsor. Some do not. Some, you know, the OAC funding can be 100% of your budget. So you have to pay attention to that as well. And then other support documents means things like your resume. Most programs are asking for a resume, and that's part of where they're going to determine your professionalism. Some programs might might require a partner, and you have to include a letter from that partner. Some programs allow for letters of support, and you might be including some there. I'm getting internet unstable. So let me know. Caitlin, go ahead.
Okay, so speaking of partners, we have a question here that someone is applying for an Artists in Communities and Schools grant. They do have a partner and a mentor, but they're not 100% sure about what artists they're going to hire. Is that okay? And then could they include artistic examples from the mentor instead while they're trying to figure out what artists they're going to hire?
Well, that's interesting. I will want you to connect with that office to make very sure. I would say in general, because I can't remember if it's an actual requirement that your artists be identified already at the time of deadline or not. In general, I will say that as much certainty as you can have at the time of deadline is helpful. All right, that is going to, because if you imagine, and this is an important point, we are not making the decisions. We are inviting a group of assessors that are people like you to come around the table to read these applications and assess them and make the decisions. If you imagine being one of those assessors and somebody says, I'm hoping to do this thing, this is why, but I don't really know who I'm going to work with yet, and I don't really know when it's going to happen, and I don't, you know, it's hard for them to say, okay, great, yes, let's give you some money, right? So as many things as you do have firmed up and can show that it's confirmed by a letter or whatnot is going to help the assessors. That being said, we all know how the life works, and we also are very aware of the fact that we're asking you to apply 4 months before it's even possible for you to be doing this work, probably, right? So, you know, if some things are yet to be determined, or you're still finalizing your plans, you know, that's okay. And again, I'm not going to answer your question for sure, because I'm not 100% sure. I'll look on the website when I have a sec. But if it's a requirement that they be identified, then this doesn't apply. But having some things that are yet to be confirmed is okay. Most people are going to understand that. But that in that case, what's sometimes helpful is if you're able to share with the jury through one of your answers, how are you going to do that? You know, if you haven't yet chosen your artists, what process are you going to do to choose them? What criteria are you going to use? Where are you going to look? How are you going to seek out those artists? That kind of thing will be helpful, and say, okay, they don't know yet, but I see they're going to partner up with this organization, and they're going to reach out through this one, and then this group is going to choose based on these things. You know, that might be enough for them to say, yeah, okay, I have confidence that they will choose accordingly. And then in the examples of the mentors, yeah, that's what's making me nervous about this particular program, that it might be the artists specifically that they want. So I will encourage you to call specifically for that program to just confirm that if it's not clear to you from the website.
And then there's just one more that is about the application submission. So someone said that they applied for an application or submitted an application in 2020, later found out that it was withdrawn because they had already applied to a grant within the same category within earlier in that year. So would they be able to resubmit the application that got withdrawn for
Yes.
review again? Okay.
Yeah,
That's what
fundamentally the answer is yes. Yeah. So there are a few things that this makes, tweaks for me, I guess, is that, yeah, you can't apply with more than one project at a deadline. You can only apply once at any one deadline. There are some programs where you're only allowed to apply once a year, even if there are multiple deadlines that year. In total, at all of OAC, you can only have 3 applications in process at any one time. So if you've applied to 3 programs and you haven't heard back from all 3 yet, you can't apply for a 4th. If you were to get a not recommended grant for one of those, then that opens up a space again, and you could. Now, I have to say, getting 3 grants in 1 year is pretty fantastic. It happens occasionally. Some people are busy enough and have enough room in their life that they could do that, but that's usually not a big problem for people. But it is something to be aware of, that there are some of these kind of limitations. Okay, so again, onto our NOVA system. So yeah, okay. So I think I've covered some of this. So you can link to the NOVA system through our website. There is a apply now button on almost every, well, I think probably on every page of our website. It doesn't mean you actually have to apply now. It just means take me to the NOVA system, and there you can either log in if you already have a profile, or you can create a profile, and you can go in and you can see what programs are available to you at that point. So anything that has the deadline within the next 2 months that you are eligible for will appear in a list for you. And by that, I really just mean if you are an individual, you're an artist, an individual artist, you'll only see programs that are open to individual artists. If you're logging in as if you're part of a theater group and you're logging in as the theater group, then you would see applications that are open for groups, that kind of thing. So that's what I mean. Once you're in there, if you are, become a regular applicant to the OAC, you're going to see your history there. You're going to see what grants you did receive, what ones you didn't. Anything that you've applied to since we've had this NOVA system, you'll be able to see the application and things like that. Okay, so some of these I've already referred to as well, that you should pay attention to what kinds of technological needs you need. So for our system, Chrome is the best, oh gosh, I don't even know what the words are, but the best platform to use to navigate through our system. It doesn't, I actually often use other ones, but some people have trouble. So depending where you are and what your own home setup is, Chrome is the recommendation. So that's just an example. But in terms of support material and things like that, make sure you pay attention to all of that and leave yourself enough time. Because again, if you find out the day before, it might be too late for you to save your visual material in a different format. Speaking of saving, you're going to want to save if you're working in the system and typing your answers. You're going to want to make sure you, like everything, save regularly. Our deadline for every program at the Ontario Arts Council is 1 p.m. You will find that every funder has a different system this way. Some people have a midnight policy, some people have a 5 p.m. policy. We have a 1 p.m. Policy. That it seems odd to people sometimes. Once you get used to it, it's no big deal, but at first it can seem weird to have 1 p.m. as the deadline. The rationale behind this is if by any chance there was some kind of a problem that was due to our system causing problems, then our tech people are still available for another 4 hours to help resolve the situation. Whereas if it was at midnight, you would have no help, and that's it. So that's sort of part of the rationale behind it. But at any rate, we had, in some ways it's just a time. That is why I'm going to always recommend that you put the day before as your deadline, just in case, and that way you have the next morning, if you have run into troubles, to either call us or finish up. I will tell you that sometimes if it's a big deadline, if it's a very popular program, it can get pretty slow on the morning of a deadline, and you could encounter problems if you've left too much to do and it's taking a long time to upload or to submit. You could miss that 1 p.m. deadline, and then unfortunately that's just the end of it. This is now a computer that shuts off, and no matter how much I like you or your artwork, there's nothing I can do to make it go back in time. So do watch that. It is a pretty strict policy that 1 p.m. is pretty firm as a deadline, and if you just didn't quite make it, it was still uploading at 12:59 or something, then I'm afraid you have to wait for the next deadline. So, make sure you pay attention to those dates. Okay, so yeah, we say this a lot to pay attention to the 1 p.m. So what happens at 1 p.m.? Well, then the system closes. And if I'm running the program, then I know everybody who's applied. I have 100 applications and I can see who they are and I can start looking at what kinds of projects are being submitted. So if it's a theater projects program, I'm going to look at who has applied, what parts of the province they come from, what kinds of theater are being submitted, what kinds of subject matter are they tackling in these projects, all of that kind of thing. Is it summer theater? Is it outdoor? Is it comedy? Is it drama? All this kind of stuff. And based on that, I am going to start thinking about who I should invite to assess these applications. There are a number of things that we consider in sending out those invitations. We obviously want to make sure that different parts of the province are included. We want to make sure there is diversity in terms of cultural backgrounds, in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of practices. All of that kind of thing are things that we take into consideration. Ability. What are other things that we think about? Language. Potentially, if it's a bilingual program, we'll have to look at how many applications came in French, things like that. And in our multidisciplinary programs, I run a lot of multidisciplinary programs. So I'm going to look, how many dance applications do I have? How many theater? How many visual arts? Who do I need? What kind of expertise do I need around the table to be able to contribute to the conversation that's going to assess these applications and fundamentally decide who is going to receive a grant or not? We also have a fairly strict policy around how often somebody can serve as an assessor. So I can't just call the same person over and over and over again to be making those selections. That if they've served with us, twice in the last 2 years, they can only serve once a year at the OAC, and they can only serve 2 years in a row, even if it's in different programs. And then it's, time for a break and we need to invite other people. Most of our programs use about 5 assessors for any given deadline. It depends a little bit. It could be as few as 3. It could be as many as maybe 6. But the average is 5 assessors. And uh, and then we do also have a strict conflict of interest policy. So obviously, if somebody applied to that deadline, they can't serve on the panel. If a member of their family applied, they can't serve. If they work for one of the organizations, if they sit on a board of director of one of those organizations, and or if they have just a very close personal relationship or professional relationship with the applicant, we wouldn't ask them to serve on that panel.
Someone asked, on average, how many applications do you get? I guess that would vary from program to program. But do you have some programs that, like, maybe your top 3 or top 5 that stand out to you right away as like our most applied for program?
Yeah, it does really vary. Some of our French language programs are, maybe 12 applications, and then we have some that are hundreds. So, a normal program would maybe be between 80 and 100 applications. But yes, our most applied to programs are the visual artists creation projects and our music recording programs. Those are the largest, although some of our literature ones are pretty up there as well. Our recommender programs, the ones where we use the partners in the community, those can have thousands throughout the year. So, but those, yeah, some of those, I would say visual arts and music creation programs are our biggest ones. So once we've invited, now these assessors also have to be willing. It's an awful lot of work. So you can imagine if you're reading 100 applications, that takes a lot of time, and you need to participate in the assessment panel process, which can be anywhere from 1 to 5 days of solid days of meetings. So the person has to be willing to take on that work and available to take on that work. So after all of that, we eventually come up with our panel of the 5 magic players, and we open up our Nova Assistant to them so that they can see all the applications, and they read them at home, and they look at the support material or listen or whatever the art form is, and they make some notes and make some preliminary sort of scoring on how they would rank these applications. And then we bring them all together. We used to do that in person, and I hope that happens really soon too, because it really is wonderful when we all can come together in a room together. But for now, we do it virtually, like everything. So we come together in a virtual meeting, and they discuss the applications, and they go around and everybody gets a chance to speak about them. And then they make their decisions at the end of that day or 2 days or week together. And they start with their top ranked application, then they go down, and at that point I will tell them how much money they have, and that's based on the budget that we are allocated from the province, and then it's divided up among our programs, as you can imagine. And I'm given an amount, and I give it to the assessors, and they start at the top, and they start giving the money away until it runs out. So unfortunately, there's never enough money. The money always runs out before they've hit a whole bunch of projects they would have loved to have funded. And so this is this is truth. So if you ever call for feedback and somebody says that to you, that is really the truth. There are lots of projects that are worthy of funding, and there's just not enough to go that far. So it doesn't mean that sometimes people will receive a letter and say, I'm sorry, you were not awarded a grant this time. And they think, oh, they hated my project. That is not necessarily true. In fact, I would say it's rarely true. And that, it's a very hard letter to get, and I fully recognize that, but it is more often that either things ran out, or it could be you forgot to include some information, or there was just a few areas of your application that were a bit unclear, or they needed a bit more information, or they had questions about, or something like that. So again, most of our programs will provide feedback if you call. Not all, but especially some of those really, really big volume ones, they just aren't able to do that. But most programs can help you a little bit with some feedback. So when the panel is reading and doing their work, most of our programs are asked to think about 3 criteria: the artistic merit, the impact, and the viability of the project. there are some programs that it's just based on artistic merit, but the vast majority of our programs, it's these three. So we've touched on a little bit, some of these already, that artistic merit, of course, it's the quality, the work that they're seeing that you're providing as examples of your work, but it's also, the how you describe the project, what it is you want to do, who you want to work with. If you're working with other artists, all of that will come into the artistic merit rank scoring. Impact, again, impact on you, on your professional life. How is this going to move your career forward? Is it the right step for you to be taking at this stage of your career? So for example, if you've never toured before and all of a sudden you're proposing a 20 city tour in like multiple countries throughout the world, and uh, yeah, you have no history of doing this, a jury might say, this is a great idea, but you're not ready for it yet. So there might be things like that that they take into consideration. Impact on your community, whether that's your community of artists, maybe you're pushing your art form, maybe you're really kind of experimenting and doing something that's going to have a really big positive impact on the art form that you're working in, and or just that you're exposing your community to an art form that they otherwise would not have access to. And then viability, they might love your work, they might love your idea, but the budget makes no sense, or the timeline, they feel like that you haven't given yourself enough time, or something like that might be something that they take into consideration. And all of these three criteria are at the OAC are equally weighed. So, it's important that you address all three of those. And the application form is structured according to these criteria. So you have the opportunity to answer questions about all three of these. Okay, so yes, so the process takes 4.5 months. At that point, you receive a notification through NOVA that the results are available, and you read the letter, and you perhaps have been one of the recipients of the grants. At that point, you acknowledge that you've read the letter. If you're an individual, you do have to provide us with your social insurance number. Arts grants are considered income, and they are taxable. You're taxed on that income, so that's an important thing for you to know. So you have to provide us with your social insurance number. And once that's done through the system, a check will be mailed to you automatically to the address that you've put on your profile. So again, you got to make sure that that's kept up to date. You then go ahead and you do your project. If it's going more or less as you proposed it, there's no need to get in touch. You can just do it, and then you'll report on it. And you will be given a deadline for your report based on the timeline that you told us that you were going to do. You're doing this summer camp in July. It's going to be finished at the end of July. We give you a few extra months to, finish things up and work on your report. And then your deadline for your report is maybe in October, and you submit that to us. Let us know how it went. Let us know how you spent the money, and show us how you recognize that this was a project that was supported from the Ontario Arts Council. And that's it. If you do, from the time that you apply to the time that you found out to the time that you're actually doing the project, maybe things have changed a little bit. If things have changed, whether it's the timeline or whether it's, I had proposed working with this artist, but now they've moved to France. So I'm going to work with a different artist and said, changes like that, you should touch in with us, and just to make sure that the project is still the project that the panel of assessors awarded you for. So, things happen. People get sick, people move, timelines change. That's fine. We understand that. But if you were going to work with a ballet dancer, that was your plan, and all of a sudden you've shifted your plan, and now you're working with something very different, maybe a hip hop artist or something, maybe that's okay. But if what the panel really liked about your project was the partnership with the ballet dancer, then that might be a problem. We want to keep it in line with the spirit of the application of the project you proposed.
There is a question speaking about artists, working with artists for your project. So someone who's a part of a non-for-profit organization wanted to bring in an artist from the United States to be featured. Does any guest speaker or artist have to be Canadian for OAC, or could they be third party, like from the US, for example?
Okay, so I think the simple answer mostly is no, they do not have to be Canadian. Most programs have a priority of supporting Ontario artists, and some have like that you must have some Ontario artists. If you have no Ontario artists, that might be a problem for certain programs. Even for the programs where you are allowed to bring in non-Ontario, so, and for us it would be Ontario, so non-Ontario artists, you just want to explain why. Was there nobody here? You know, we want to give work to Ontario artists. So was there nobody here that could have done that work for you, that would have done? And maybe the answer is no, that the expert is down in the States. They're doing something different and are bringing an expertise or bringing, you know, something that doesn't exist here, and that you are actually giving opportunities to Ontario artists to work with or listen to or whatever, this expert or whatever. That's probably going to be fine in that case. So, but usually they like to have a rationale as to why it's important. And sometimes it's self-evident why it's important that it be that particular individual. But if it's not, it'll be important for you just to articulate what it is that is so important about bringing that individual and why it couldn't have been someone from Ontario. Now, if by any chance you get that letter and it says, unfortunately, you did not receive the grant, obviously we understand that that's going to be disappointing, to say the least. And, you know, I will recommend that if you feel like, you know, after a little while, when you sort of come to terms with it, if you feel like you'd be open to hearing some feedback, if the program does give feedback, I really highly recommend it. There's so many things that you can learn, and sometimes it wasn't at all what you were assuming the problem was. So it can really help you. And the whole point of our doing feedback really is about your future applications. We're really trying to say, you know, next time think about including this, or maybe, you know, I don't know, depending what the problem is, that, you know, it may help you with your future applications, and that is the whole point. I will even say that some of the most productive conversations that I've had is feedback for people who did receive a grant, because similarly, just because you received the grant didn't think, it doesn't necessarily mean they thought it was perfect, right? They still may have had some issues with it, and or maybe it's very helpful to hear this is what they really liked about it, the way you articulated this particular aspect of your project. That's what resonated with the jury, or, you know, something like that. So, you know, you can certainly call for feedback if you've been awarded a grant too, and certainly I have some applicants that always do, and it helps with their future grant writing. And yes, you can reapply. Not unlike the question we had earlier, if you have applied for something and you didn't get it, you can try again with the same application fund. I mean, you'd have to put it into a new form and things like that, but, you know, with the same project, with this, you don't have to change anything if you don't want to, and try again. And you never know, right? It's going to be a different jury. There's going to be different the other applicants are going to be different. There is, you know, for sure a possibility with the exact same application, you might get it next time. Or you can tweak it a little bit, or you probably are, at very least, are going to have to change the dates or something. Or maybe you've gotten some feedback and you've learned how to strengthen the application, and you resubmit with a new application. So again, as long as you're allowed to apply at the next deadline. So again, if it's not one of those programs that says you're only allowed to apply once a year or something, but then you just wait till the next year, you can apply again for the same project if it's something that, like I say, you could do at any time. I mean, if it was a project that had to happen last summer, then obviously that doesn't apply. But if you can come back and try again. And we've written here, don't be discouraged. I mean, that, but I realize that's easy for me to say and less easy to feel sometimes. But just to bear in mind that there are always not just, you know, good projects. There's often really great projects that don't get funded. So, you know, do keep that in line. And you're certainly, unfortunately, not alone. In our programs, I would say an average of about 30% of the applicants will receive a grant. In some programs, it's much lower. Some programs, it's a bit higher. So if you think 1 in 4, maybe 1 in 3 people are going to get the grant, it does mean that 2 out of 3 people are not getting it. You know, that is the reality. And you have to think about that when you're applying. You know, is it worth it for you to put in that work and to put yourself out there, when there is those kind of odds that you may not get the grant? I have many applicants, however, and I certainly felt this when I used to work in art galleries, and I applied for many grants, many of which I didn't get. But going through the process of writing the application kind of is work I had to do anyway. I had to think through the project. I had to make sure I had a budget that worked for it, regardless of whether I was going to get this grant or not. I was going to do this project. So, in those cases, I felt it was work I had to do anyway. Um, so it was worth my while to try. So our general tips, the number one tip, of course, is to call us. Again, as much pre-work that you can do as possible is helpful in those phone calls. And also to keep in mind that you need to have a project that you're thinking about. You can't just call, well, you can call me and say whatever you want, but it's going to be less useful if you call me and say, I'm a visual artist, what do you got for me, kind of thing. It's like, well, what do you want to do with your visual? Like, what are you looking to get support to do? You need to have an idea of what it is that you want to do with these funds, and then I can help guide you to where you're going to be the best fit. Have peers review your application. So as our artists, we are very in our heads, and it's very clear to us what we want to do and why. And sometimes, you might be a very strong writer, you might not be. You might be very comfortable in English, you might not be. So how you express it in this application form may not come out the way it is in your head. And having someone else read it can be very helpful. And I found always that it's helpful if it's someone who knows your work a little bit, but not too well, not your studio partner who lives and breathes the project. But someone who knows a little bit about what you do, but maybe not too much. We have a little spell check joke in there. We are not going to penalize people because they don't have spelling mistakes or grammar mistakes, or their comfort with the English language is not great. But we share that only because if there are things you can do, like use the spell check on your computer, or having someone else, read it for mistakes and for clarity for you, it just helps the assessors. Because again, if you imagine being sent 100 applications or so, and you're reading them and reading them and reading them, if you come across an application that is riddled with mistakes, and it makes it hard to read, and it even when you're trying not to, it might influence you a little bit. You might just think this is a really hard application, so as much as you can to try to help the assessors out to not have that experience is what we're getting at really here. But we do ask assessors to really come with us, and in fact, we don't even really need to ask them, because they do anyway. They come with a spirit of generosity and wanting, they want to give out the money and support some other artists in the community. So don't underestimate support material and documents. And I guess by this we mean don't leave it to the last minute. Think about what artistic examples you want to include in your project proposal. It should support the project you're proposing. So sometimes people want to give us as many examples of the many, many different kinds of writing that they do. I do poetry, and I do mysteries, and I do dramas, and I do, thrillers. And I'm going to give you an example of every single one of those things. That may not be the wisest choice, because that might not be what your project about is. If your project is about your poetry, they're going to want to see your poetry, for example. And probably recent work, generally speaking, is, if you have to choose, choosing something more recent, except if perhaps you're a choreographer and you are going back to a work that you did 20 years ago, and you're re-looking at it now in a different kind of way, then you might want to include that piece from 20 years ago, as well as something more recent that shows how your style has changed or developed. So be detailed but concise, and don't repeat. So again, this is more just keeping in mind your reader, okay? That you don't need to say the same thing 20 times. Once you've said it, it's there. They've read it. They've are going to absorb it. But they do want to have a full picture of what it is that you're hoping to do. Just imagine, if you're reading it, can you imagine who this person is that's applying, what it is that they want to do, how they're going to approach this project, who are they going to reach out to, how are they, they want to be able to sort of imagine this project that you are proposing. So giving them enough that they can do that, but not, repeating the same thing over and over again is not necessary. I have right from the heart here. Remember that the assessment panel is made up of your peers. These are other artists, arts workers, arts administrators, depending on the program, they are going to understand that passion that you have, and they're going to react to it. They're going to respond to it. So you shouldn't shy away from, this is why I want to do this thing and what I believe in. You do have to answer the questions, and you do have to give them the information they need. But, one of the things I'm often asked is what makes the difference between the great project that does get funding and the great project that doesn't get funding. And, there's no magic to this. So, I don't have a fail-proof answer for you. But one thing I have noticed is that it is the projects that the assessors get excited about. They, for whatever reason, are like, this is exactly what this artist needs at this time, right now. It's urgent. They need to do that. We have to give them this money. And that comes through how you're telling your story and how you're sharing with them your own urgency for this program or project, and for the passion you have for this project you're proposing. We talked a little bit about, how knowing how much you need to ask for. If you start with how much do you need? How much do you need to pay yourself? How much do you need to pay your other artists? What kind of costume costs you have? What kind of administrative costs you have? Whatever. And again, you need to check at what's eligible to ask for. And then what other sources of revenue. So let's say you decide, okay, I need $10,000 to do this project, but I already have $3,000 from either a corporate sponsor or from the tickets I'm going to sell or whatnot. So I need $7,000. I'm going to need to ask the OAC for $7,000. And then calling for feedback at the end of the whole thing, again, whether you're successful or not. So that is sort of the main information I wanted to share with you all. And it's not program specific, I realize. It is just sort of general about OAC in general, and hopefully, like I say, applicable to other funding agencies or other funders in general. But if there are some questions, I'm happy to take some now.
Maura, I would like to bring one question that was written at the very beginning in the question and answer. It was related to students. So the person, and I wanted to bring the question back because there might be other participants that might be interested in. The question had to do is that, are there any resources for students? And on top of that, I would like to ask, can a student participate and ask for a grant? Thank you.
So unfortunately, the quick answer is no. The OAC funds professional artists, and students are not professional yet. They are still in their training period. So, student work is not something that is supported at OAC. There's maybe I realize this doesn't apply to everybody, but there are maybe programs through universities and whatnot that you might be able to get some support for. But it is professional artists that are supported through the province, through the Ontario Arts Council.
Great. All right. Well, to wrap it up, everybody will be receiving an email from me probably within the next 24 hours with a copy of a quick guide to grants. It's a PDF that we created with a list of every single grant possible that we found anyways for Windsor-based artists. So that ranges from our very local grants with the ACHF. First deadline is tomorrow, but there is another one in July, 2 OAC grants, 2 the Canadian Art Council grants, and then a few more specific ones such as Factor, as an example. Always feel free to reach out to us at ACWR, visit our website. We have a calls and audition section. We have a community event calendar. We also offer grant writing consultations. So if you need someone from that outside perspective with a second pair of eyes, by all means, please email us. And I believe that's it. If you have any further questions for Maura, her contact information is there. It's also on the OAC website. And if you have any questions for us, I'm sure we can also answer them. And
I can see there's just a couple more things about paying yourself, Caitlin, that I'm happy to answer while we've got people here.
Perfect.
So paying yourself is really important. One of the things that we ask in the application form is, what are you going to do if you don't get as much money as you need, or you don't raise the money? And people sometimes will say, well, we won't pay ourselves. That is the wrong answer. This is an arts council. We are here. Our very reason for being is that for artists to get paid for the work that we do. And again, because you're being assessed by other artists, you know, you want to they want to see you pay yourself. So how much you pay yourself is a great question. And and I'm going to put you off a little bit, unfortunately, because it really differs. So there's different standards for depending on what kind of artist you are. So if you are a visual artist, CARFAC rates are what you want to look at. So you can go to CARFAC Ontario, the Canadian Artist Representative of Ontario. They have standards, and actually other disciplines often use the CARFAC rates as well. But a dance artist will go to the Canadian Association of Canadian Alliance of Dance Artists, CADA. They set rates for them. If you're a composer, there's the Composers League of Canada. If you're a writer, you might want to check in with the Writers Union. If media artists can go to Media Arts Network of Ontario. So you want to go to the art service organization of your discipline and either see if they set rates or how, if they can put you in touch or what they would recommend. And part of it is, I'm going to say it's good industry standard. Like what do other people who do work like you charge and pay yourself? And if you're hiring another artist to work with you, you might just say, what do you normally get paid for this kind of work? So that could be part of it. But there are standards that you can use as a at least as a starting point. And I would think maybe the Arts Council here can help you with that a little bit too, to get you in touch with the right standard.
Absolutely. We have those resources on our website as well, of how you should be paid and where these quotes come from. So that's something we can provide information on.
Okay, and yeah, there's just it's a starting grant for visual artists. I mean, again, you can touch in with the visual arts office and look at the visual arts creation program. It is such a competitive one, but it is the standard one. Otherwise, it is the exhibition assistance program through our recommender programs that you might want to look at if you have any exhibitions coming up. They don't have to be in public galleries, so you might want to look at that. And then there is again, just to reiterate, if you are someone with a disability and you need help navigating our systems, if you need help making an application, and or if you get a grant and you need help executing your project because of your disability, we have additional funds available for all of those. So do just get in touch with us and ask us about that, and we can start that in motion. Sometimes before a deadline, we do need, I think we say 4 to 6 weeks before a deadline. So ideally, we need a little bit of lead time to help you out with that. But just please do get in touch. We do also have a program, a Deaf and Disability Arts program that you might be interested in looking at as well.
Great. Awesome.
The last thing I would say, sorry, I was going to say one last thing, which is we are always looking for new assessors. So like I say, we don't want to repeat the same people over and over and over again. We're always looking for people in different parts of the province with different skills. If that's something of interest to you, we do, it might not happen immediately because of all the things that we need to think about when putting together a panel. So it might not be that, you get in touch and next week you're on a panel. It might take, a few years before that perfect match comes. But there is a spot on our website to put your name forward. And I think they ask for a resume or something like that. And then we do share these names around among each other as colleagues at the OAC. If, I'll go to my colleague and say, I need somebody working, who lives in the Southwest, who works with clay or something, and so we do share those names too.
Someone just asked if assessors are paid.
Yes, we do compensate. I'll say it's an honorarium for the reading time as well as for the time in the meetings. Whether that's enough given how much work it is, that might depend on your perspective, but we do compensate for the time a little bit. Yes.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. And like I said, always reach out to ACWR. We're happy to help. Reach out to the OAC. These grants are here for you. They're not to turn you away from applying or, presenting your work. And if you want to hear more about things coming up in your area, you can always subscribe to our Arts Notes newsletter that goes out every Wednesday. We also have a podcast that goes out at the end of the month. So these are just ways to stay connected as well, and follow us on social media and the OAC. So just to sign off, I'd like to thank our funders, the Ontario Arts Council, and the City of Windsor, and our members for their continued support. So I believe that's everything. I hope everyone has a great evening, and we hope to see you soon.
Take care.